my name is Angie. I am by trade both an RN and a bookkeeper, so I have an interesting job. Um, Interestingly enough, both Rob and I have not been called to quit our jobs and start doing mission work per se as like a job, like seems common for twin flames once they're in union. So what we've done is just shared our story through videos. That was the first calling that we had, and now we just support the twin flame community with weekly videos answering people's questions, and then also doing other videos, just teaching and helping guide people through their own journey, because we know how hard this journey can be.
And myself, I am an automotive partsman. I have been doing that for, well, since about 1984 is when I got started into the trade. And it's served me very well. Sometimes when I've been involved in management, it's taken a lot of my time and energy, but it's also both sometimes fed and sometimes drained my ego. Ego is sometimes something that the masculine side of a twin flame union has troubles with. So I've had lots of chances to bleed off my ego at work. Well, except for the early years where it drained into my personal life, but that was our first time getting together. I usually find, because I'm what's known as the matrix twin, the one that has started from the three-dimensional side and worked towards 4 and 5-dimensional side. I find that I spend quite a bit of my time supporting the 5-dimensional twin, the one that has contact with a lot more with 5D than I do. But between the two of us, we've got an interesting balance. Angie's the spiritual twin. I'm the matrix twin. I am learning a lot about the spiritual side, and she's over the years has had to learn a lot about grounding back to the 3-dimensional side.
Yes,
it really helps us both to be, in some cases, so different.
Excellent. No, I think that's great actually, because I find myself at times very much up there.
Yeah.
So grounding is essential within all this. Although what's interesting about it is people find me a very grounding person. So however much I am very much connected with the 5-dimensional space, I'm very much, in other people's eyes, very much grounded. So very interesting, isn't it? And that dynamic between you two obviously works really well. So
yes,
it does.
Yeah, it does. And of course, didn't in the beginning, because like any twin flame couple, you're both so out of balance that you're too far apart. But now that we've come into our own balances, we have a good balance between us.
Excellent. And you look very grounded today, very much in the present, which is beautiful. So it's a great place to start and look at your journey and pathway and what's led you to the place you are today. And the first start of the journey is where we look at our original world and our old self. So we could say we're looking at the ugly part of our journey to start off with.
Well, it sometimes helps to start with the old self by starting right back in the beginning as to how either one of us or both of us even got involved with any form of spirituality. I'm going to start with me, starting from a young kid. When I was a young child, like even 6, 7, 8 years old, my family, for whatever reason, they loved water. We played on our big rivers that we have here in Canada with boats, and I learned grounding and appreciation of nature as a young child, especially the flow and movement of water. Water was very, very much a draw for me. It was a fascination. And as I grew into my teens, we were doing water activities every weekend. But it wasn't until my early 20s that I started to branch out and discover more, let's just say crystals. I would spend a year or a year and a half working on something like crystals. And then I met Angie. Now, I met Angie when I was in my early 30s, but I'm going to let Angie tell about her younger time so that we can meet at the early 30s and discuss when we first met.
So for me, I grew up in a home with abuse, which, Not surprising, because quite a few twin flames have chosen these kind of experiences. We're here to break some of those old patterns and old templates.
Yeah.
So I had to work really hard at doing a lot of healing. I was 18 in counseling, doing a lot of work on myself. And after counseling and after graduating from nursing, I just felt this strong call to move to a different city. And wasn't long after, I think about a month after I moved here, met Rob. So, and it was just this weird, unique way that we met too, which again, I know is a very twin flamey thing.
It's interesting how we actually ended up coming together. We both started from the city of Edmonton, which is a 3 to 3.5 hour drive away, depending upon which end of the city you're dealing with.
Yeah.
And we both, in our paths, moved to Calgary. Now, I moved to Calgary about 3 years before Angie.
Yeah.
So I had a chance to get all established here. I was chasing a career and working like crazy and playing like crazy. And then Angie moves to Calgary in early 1997. And as a new Calgarian, she gets all nice and brave one day.
Yeah, I felt actually quite guided to pull this out. So this is how we met, interestingly enough. I actually put this, I don't know how well you can read it, I'll read it. But I put this in the laundry room of the apartment I was in, because I had just moved and I was looking for friends. So I said, hi, I'm new here. I've just moved to Calgary and I'm interested in meeting some people. And I had even like this little tear off thing. It's so funny that I still have this. So there was these little tear offs where my phone number was. And Rob just happened to be one of the people that called. And I wasn't looking for anything romantic at all. I was just trying to connect and, you know, build a life in Calgary with new friends. So we actually lived in the same apartment building, and he called, and it was just instant connection.
Yeah.
We talked and talked and talked on the phone. It took us a little while to meet, not long, but a little while to meet. But the amount of time we spent on the phone was, I don't know whether it was exhausting or hypnotic, but I think the term that we used was 90 hours of being awake and communicating with only 8 hours of sleep.
Well, that was later. That
Yeah.
wasn't on the phone yet. But yeah, our connection was just constant talking. We talked and talked. It was like very much like, you know, what it really is two souls now coming back together and catching up, going, okay, what have you been up to since I last saw you?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's really neat.
And what's interesting about the energetic connection as well is you've got that beautiful spark of energy, which is phenomenal, isn't it? But it's amazing how that energy can be very explosive and very coming together. But at the same time, it can be very draining because of that energy is so intense, you know.
Yeah.
Well, you almost give your whole self to just feeding that new energy that you have. Wow, I'm just meeting somebody and we seem to connect, and we've got all these things that seem to be in common, but it's not things that we would just do. It's ways of thinking and ways of feeling that I haven't seen in anybody else. So you just keep on communicating and feeding that connection. And yeah, you get tired.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question then, because we move on to the next phase of the journey, which is I speak about it as being the soul awakening. But in the twin flame dynamic, I've just really think about it and reflect upon it and see it more as soul recognition, because soul recognition is when our souls awaken.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God, excuse my language, but it's that soul recognition and you know, we're immediately realize what this connection is, what this dynamic is, and everything starts to shift in that moment, because prior to that, it's just a beautiful, loving connection. And then you realize when you get that soul recognition, you know, how challenging it can potentially be, you know, and all the doubts come up. So it'd be interesting to see what your recognition of one another was.
Well, for me, the soul recognition, it took a long time. When we first met, I just took Angie for a tour of the Rocky Mountains, but we had an amazing day together, the first day that we spent the day together. And we had an event near the end of that day that was something that's part of nature, but we called it a reverse sunset. It's hard to describe, but there was a thunderstorm and the sun was setting behind us, but because of the thunderstorm in front of us, it was very white, puffy cloud. The sun was reflecting sunlight across the lake, and it literally looked like the sunlight was coming from the sunset side of the equation as opposed to the sunny side. I'd never seen that before. It was amazing, and I considered that to be a gift of creator at the time, something that was a sign or a symbol, but it wasn't really going to survive as far as being something that would keep us together for more than just a few months. We got together and spent 3 or 4 months together, and then we broke apart.
Yeah.
And we spent 17 years apart before we found another opportunity to re-recognize and understand our soul connection.
Yeah, but
So can I ask you a quick question there then? Because you know, prior to that, did you feel like you had that recognition prior to that breakup, Rob?
Oh, absolutely. I knew that Angie was someone special, someone that I had a connection with that I'd never felt before. And it was so unique. So I knew that she was very, very unusual, very special in my life. But also at that time of life, I was very ego-based. I was working on a management career, and everything was about time management. And I got up, I ate the same breakfast Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then Tuesday, Thursday was something different. I dressed in certain clothes, Monday, Wednesday, Friday clothes, and Tuesday, Thursday clothes. And I did things on the weekend. I was planned 3 weeks ahead. I could tell you what I was doing hour by hour for the next 2 weeks. And so a soul connection, as much as it felt nice and cute, didn't really fit in my life plan at the time. I was very ego and time-based driven. So as much as I recognized it and liked it, it didn't really fit into how I was living at that time. So it did get ignored or just left as an understanding that just didn't fit.
How about yourself then, Angie? Tell me a bit more about your soul recognition.
The soul recognition for me was almost instant. Like for me, it was when we were on the phone before we even met physically. So when he called me from this note that I put up, I didn't even know how I knew him, but I just knew I knew him. And of course, synchronistically, you know, part of the twin flame journey, he had just started 2 weeks of holidays. So he said, I'm going to go to the mountains tomorrow. Do you want to come? And I mean, I was a 23-year-old single girl who had just moved to a new city, who was at that point in my life very timid, very skittish. I had only dated one other person, so I was not really comfortable with men, yet I just felt completely safe to go with him. I didn't even second guess. I just said, sure, you know, it just felt totally comfortable. So the soul recognition was there before even meeting, because I just somehow knew I knew him without even understanding anything at that point about souls, about spirit, about connection, any of that. So yeah, it was this instant knowing that there's something special about you. So yeah, it was
interesting.
magical.
So
we got together and enjoyed that connection. But again, it did break apart. It broke apart after 4 or 5 months.
Yeah. Well, more like 7, but yeah.
Okay. It was starting to come unraveled because we were not at the same place, same level.
No.
Angie was very strongly trying to practice various forms of spirituality, and I was recognizing that it existed, but not practicing it on a daily basis. So as much as we had the recognition, we didn't have at that time a similar lifestyle or desire to share that lifestyle that would allow it to grow.
Yeah. Okay. So when you had that separation phase, you know, after recognition, I think we often go through this place of self-inquiry, this battle with ego. You know, ego consciousness and soul-based consciousness is where our soul says one thing and says, ooh, you know, this person is very special, you know, unique, very, you know, calls me from my soul in many ways. But the ego is saying, no, this can't be right. You know, every single time we have this sort of you know, battle inside of our heads. Did you go through those things yourself, either, you know, prior to that separation, or was it the separation that caused that?
I think for me, it was even prior to the separation. One of the things for me that was triggered from our connection was a huge spiritual awakening. I started seeing angels, I started seeing auras, my psychic abilities were coming out. So, you know, I was just in this whole different realm than he was. Of course, he's more business based and go, go, go. So, you know, there was a constant frustration between us of, you know, like we didn't kind of have a good balance between us. I was way so high in 5D and he was way too intense in 3D. So yeah, I had a lot of struggle back and forth of, you know, wanting to make it work, but not seeing how it was possible.
Yeah. And myself, I going into early adulthood, I had this knack, this ability, and I'd recognized it, to identify and find people that had an unlevel or unusual level of spirituality. I would find the people that were closet crystal collectors, as an example. They would, and I'd get talking with them, and I'd say, "Well, what do you do for your passion?" And they would talk about various things. I would find people that were spiritually based. I almost felt like a spiritual person magnet. So when I found Angie, I really had a hard time differentiating her from the others, other than the fact that we had some very distinct signs that did create a separation, but I didn't recognize how significant it was to begin with.
Did you feel that sort of pull towards her, obviously, still at that time?
No, I always did. From the day I first met her, she never really escaped my consciousness, either during the time we were together or even as we were going through our separation phase. During our separation phase, I actually had another 12-year relationship. We were apart for 17 years. And that particular relationship was another person who was very spiritually based. And their growth and what they were learning along the way, of course, I participated in. I watched over her shoulder and watched what she was going through. And many, many times I would see her learn something, and then I would learn it with her, and I'd go, oh, well, you know, if I only kind of knew this more when I knew Angie. And and it felt like an ever growing education through the growth of others and my own growth that caused me over the years to start to understand what Angie and I had gone through years before.
So in many ways we're in this 12-year relationship, obviously, but in some ways you were being guided back to her in these moments of consciousness of, you know.
Yeah, it always seemed to be that Angie was my benchmark. Whenever I'd learn something, I'd be thinking, well, what would Angie say, or what would Angie do, or oh, maybe that's what Angie was talking about all the years before. Yeah, it was like playing a big game of catch up.
So we speak about like Rob, obviously you regard yourself as the masculine counterpart, and Angie, you're the feminine, would you say?
Yeah.
Would that very much correlate to the push and the pull energies as well between you two?
Some, a little, yet not always. Like, it's often the masculine that's the runner and the feminine that's the chaser. I was very much the runner in our connection. In fact, that's one of the biggest reasons we broke up, is because I kept pulling away, and he finally was like, if you want to go, then go.
Yeah.
So yeah, in that sense, you know, we were a little opposite than the normal sort of flow of twin flames. I just had so much fear from, you know, my childhood, and then being all so vulnerable. It just was like very overwhelming for me to feel this much of intense love.
And also, I had been, by the time I met Angie in my life, I'm nearly 10 years older than her. I had already been through, well, here I go. I'd already been through a marriage and a divorce, and I'd seen normal relationships come and go, and had been involved. So I felt like I had a bit more resilience and experience that would allow us to maybe have some differences, but still be in communication. And a lot of things that Angie was feeling, was brand new to her.
Completely.
She was younger in life, and she didn't know what to do with some of it. So sometimes when it scared her, she would turn mean and push me away.
I think that's the interesting thing about these connections is, you know, I've been on my spiritual journey for a long time, and I'm still fairly young in many ways. But you know, being on my spiritual journey, I thought, you know, I'd encountered quite strong connections and things like this. And you know, with certain connections, that intensity you can't ever prepare yourself for.
No.
You know, however much you want to say, oh, I'm going to be ready, I'll be fine, whatever is thrown at me, and then the universe just throws this one person,
Yeah.
Which you can't explainably understand the emotions that you go through, that roller coaster of emotions, like complete, beautiful, and intense love, and then that real depth of despair, and, you know, completely losing ourselves amongst it, you know.
Very much so. Yeah, it's almost like there's no way to prepare for something like you say that intense, because you've never felt all of that before.
No, it's
all
very true.
at once too, you know, like you say, the depth of love that you feel, but then the depth of despair all at the same time. It's like just so overwhelming.
So what are some of the other battles that you faced in terms of your ego before that separation, or within that separation?
For me, there was a lot of ego in the sense of thinking, you know, I was so much more advanced than him, and if he could just get on my path, we'd be fine. And why can't he wake up? And why can't he see that we're supposed to be together and, you know, believe in angels? Not that he didn't, but he just didn't believe in them the way I did. I mean, I was seeing them, right? So I was so living a 5D life, expecting that he should be on that path with me. And when he wasn't, I'm like, well, what's wrong with you? Like, I got it together. Why aren't you getting it together?
Yeah.
So definitely a lot of ego there for me, thinking I had it all figured out and he was the problem.
But of course, back then I was seeing Angie from almost the opposite point of view. I was overgrounded, as per se. I was so grounded that I couldn't really reach anywhere other than around the 3 to 3.5D dimension, if I wanted to call it that. I couldn't really reach very far up because everything I was doing had to be supported by some thought of science or time management. So I thought Angie was just way too flighty. Why couldn't she just get it together and come down and get and hold a job and all these other things, where she was having trouble with that? We were so incredibly different.
Yeah.
And I found that I was having troubles with, I hate to say this now because it's harsh, but the word was, I was having troubles respecting who she was outside of spirituality. I had the ability to accept that she was a very spiritual person who could see angels, and I was nowhere near that, but I guess some people can do that. But there was more to life, and life meant getting a job and getting a career going and everything else, which she wasn't doing. So I guess I was having troubles respecting who she was on the outside.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting. No, thanks for sharing that, because, you know, often we look so much at the inner world of, you know, the inner conflicts, whereas there is so much third dimensional conflicts that we go through as well. Not that we are ever judging one another, but it's like, how do they fit into our lives in many ways? You know, it's not a place of judgment, but more so a place of, where would they fit into my life? How would we work and, you know, come together, you know?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So then we got to a point, I'm not sure if you're ready for this, but then we got to a point where, after years of what we'd call separation, barely in contact, with about a 3 or 4 year span where we weren't in contact, then we started to get back into contact again. You know, the Merry Christmas, Happy Birthday routine started back up.
Yeah.
And that started to bring us a little closer back together. I was very happy after 3 or 4 years of not having her in my life at all, that we were at least back in touch. I was thinking, there's a person I would love to have in my life as a friend, but I did not have any ambitions to go any farther than that.
Mm.
Yeah. Whereas me, I was the one that discovered the twin flame concept. So, you know, I held on to that for a year and a half, not even sure what to do with it. We were both in long-term relationships. I'm like, do I tell him? Do I not? And so I fought it for a long time. I kept being told, you know, I meditate, and I kept being told in meditation, tell him. I'm like, absolutely not. I'm not wrecking anybody's life and blowing up my life or his life. And
Yeah.
finally was guided to tell him.
And
I mean, the
so,
interesting thing about this dynamic as well is friendship is very hard. You know, very hard to have a friendship with somebody that's got, you know, this intense, you know, emotion and connection with, because, you know, how can you how can you be in proximity or in communication with them when there's that beautiful energy that
Yeah.
you can't share with them, you know, in some ways.
throughout the years of separation, I'd actually learned enough to start to understand the difference between the emotional connection and the spiritual connection. I'd learned enough to understand that they both work differently, but can work in harmony. And that was very, very key to us drifting back together. What I was
Interesting.
really, really respecting was my understanding of the spiritual connection looking back at our past without understanding the twin flame dynamic, because she had not told me about that yet.
Very good, very good. So if we move forward past separation for a moment and we look at the shift, and the shift is very much that shift in consciousness that we go through, where we start to realize that we are on this path in many ways. We start to have trust, we start to have faith, even though in the physical reality it could seem like there's nothing you know, physical to grasp hold of, you know. But did you feel like you went through a phase of the shift where you began to, you know, have faith, trust, and allow yourself to be guided in each and every moment so that you could come together, you know?
For me, very much so. Yeah. All the years we were apart, I, you know, continued growing, not even understanding why I was growing, but I constantly felt this push that I had to heal this and deal with that and face that. And even though I wanted to walk away from spirituality after we broke up, the draw just kept pulling me further and further in. So I was constantly reading books and learning and growing. And I got to a point with, you know, my studies and my understanding of spirituality that everything happens for a reason, and everything is happening for our highest and divine best. And we're co-creators of it. So I did start to develop a trust of, okay, so whatever has happened in my life has happened for a reason. I mean, at this point, I didn't understand us getting back together at all. But I was able to give it a peace and have a peace of mind with it and go, okay, it had a reason, whatever that was, you know, whether it was my soul's growth, I didn't know at that point, but I was able to just honor my journey and trust the flow of life instead of being so rigid and trying to push the flow of life all the time. So yeah, for me,
Excellent.
I did find that nice balance of some peace and some
Yeah.
trust.
Learning how to trust and have faith is a beautiful
Yeah.
thing. I mean, I had an experience, you know, when I went over to Wales, and I went to Wales to do a course. You know, I was delivering a course, and my car broke down. I won't go through the whole story, but just so happened that everybody was there to help me in that moment. You know, in the moment of despair when you needed to get to a certain place, then all this trust and faith just popped in and said, Andy, you've got to trust and have faith right now. You know, it's a beautiful thing. You know, but no, I completely get what you mean there. Completely relate, and you know, having trust and faith is essential in this journey, because it can be challenging, can't it? So.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I went through a lot of hard times in the years we were apart. And for a long time, I didn't trust the journey. I didn't trust spirit. I gave up on my angels. I'm like, forget it. I don't even want to see you. So I closed down all of my gifts because I just didn't want to I didn't want any part of it. And it took a lot of years of growth to reopen all of that and go, okay, that all happened for a reason.
So how about yourself, Rob? What was the shifting in consciousness for you?
It was actually a very slow shift, mostly based upon education. I still had very spiritually based people in my life, and through learning with them, for example, my karmic partner I was with for 12 years, she took up body talk. She took up craniosacral treatments. So she would do those, and that was just a couple of modalities that she did, and I was learning along with her. I have another close friend that deals strongly with crystals. I keep coming back to that because that was so much the start of my awakening. But I was gaining all these little puzzle pieces. I wasn't really assembling them a lot myself, but my awareness was causing me to have a much, much bigger picture and appreciation and somewhat of a curiosity. So I was starting to learn more. I wouldn't just have a conversation with someone and they'd go, oh yeah, I do this. And I'd go, okay, great, you do that. I know what that is. Thanks. Let's move on. I'd quiz them out a little bit, ask them how far it had taken them, like what had they learned. So I was growing, but at a very slow rate. But what I didn't appreciate was how much all those puzzle pieces would be necessary for Angie and I to get back together.
Yeah.
So there came a time Angie got all brave again, just like the note that she put in the laundry room all those years earlier. Angie got brave one day and sent me a message that, now I'll see if I can get it close to being right, that she sent me a message saying, if I could explain or give you an understanding of what our connection is about, would you want to know about it? And I answered back that yes, I was interested. Actually, I was very interested because she hadn't talked a lot of deep spiritual stuff to me because we were just more or less just barely in touch.
Yeah.
But I knew that she would probably be onto something, and if it was important enough that she would risk that strong of a question after just a few very gentle, very careful meetings, I knew it had to be something fairly big. So I was very curious as to what she had to say.
And again, it comes back to the polarity of emotions again there as well.
Yeah.
Because you've got the depths of despair, and then in those moments of separation or whatever you're going through, the depth of courage and strength that you must have had to have had in order to just, bring that out of you and say, look, I need to do this.
It was a lot. It was a lot. In fact, after I finally told him, and I didn't tell him anything about twin flames, I just gave him the words and said, if you want to look it up or if it resonates, that's totally up to you. But after I told him, I did this over text, I just sat and cried because I thought, that's it. I've lost him. He's going to think I'm a nutcase. Because, of course, I'm still remembering the old Rob who wasn't spiritually open enough to understand these things or have an interest in them. So I didn't realize all the growth he had gone through all the years we were apart. I was still thinking he was the same Rob that I knew way back then. So I just sat and bawled and thought, okay, he'll never speak to me again. That's it. I've lost him. And an hour later, he sends me a text back and says a few things and then also says, and I still love you.
I got all brave. If she was going to be brave enough to try to explain our connection, I was going to still let her know that she still had a very special place in my heart. So yeah, I texted back that I still loved her, and that was very hard for me to do because I was still in my 12-year relationship. That was very, very unfair. I was all of a sudden very divided within myself, and very vulnerable to myself because I was also having the what the heck are you doing, Rob, by inviting further deeper communication. At that point I was afraid it was going to be another whirling vortex of communication that would just confuse the heck out of me.
So if we move further on your journey now into the phase of transcendence where you really get to the depths of all your learning, your growth, and you really transcend your consciousness, where you can in many ways come into union. You know, I believe each and every one of us, you know, we are all individuals on this journey, whether we like it or not. We've got our own challenges, and for me, it comes back to our core wounds. You know, what are our core wounds that we have to work through in order to not only come into union with ourselves, but then allow ourselves to you know, come into union with our counterpart, wherever that might be. You know, so what would you say your greatest challenges and obstacles were, and what would you say you learned the most from them?
Oh, goodness, that's a big question. For me, I think the two, if I had to limit it to two, it would be trust and abandonment, were my two biggest core wounds that I had to heal through. And you know, the learning was so immense. That's probably why we had such a long separation, is because I had a heck of a learning to do, and a lot of growing to do, and a lot of healing to do.
Yeah.
But it was certainly all worth it.
Definitely. So what did you learn the most through that if we look first of all at that abandonment stuff, what was your biggest learning through in that?
I think the biggest, actually, for both of them, the biggest learning for me was that it's not about anybody or anything outside of me that's abandoning me. It's learning not to abandon the self. And same thing with trust. It's not learning to trust another person. It's learning to trust myself. So it all came back to self for both of them. It was, you know, learning to heal my wounds basically from inside out, and know that I am the one that I need to constantly look at for my trust, for my my own guidance, my own experience. It's not about, well, what if they leave? Because we're never guaranteed that somebody's going to stay with us. We're never guaranteed that somebody is not going to betray our trust. So it's learning, for me, it was learning about honoring and trusting myself and taking care of myself and not abandoning myself, which was a long journey.
It's very interesting you mentioned that as well, because I you know, from you explaining that, it's as if those two went very much hand in hand. You know, that trust and abandonment. If you had that trust, there wasn't that abandonment, or that abandonment's, you know, dissipated in some way or form. You know.
Right. Yeah, very much so.
I did have one question that came to mind here before we move over to you, Rob, because I wonder if you saw that reflected in Rob, in terms of that abandonment, whether you saw that reflected in his actions and the way that he was interacting and engaging with you.
Not the abandonment. Interestingly enough, he wouldn't abandon me, no matter how much I kept trying to push him away. I mean, he finally was the one that broke up with me, but only because I wanted it. I kept pushing him away enough that he was finally like, okay, I will honor that if that's what you want.
I finally had no other choice.
Yeah. But no, he was very, very much with me. He did not ever abandon me. And I recognized that even back then. It was almost like I was testing him to see, you know, are you going to leave? Are you going to leave? And he, even when he finally did leave, he still didn't.
Love it. Yeah. And obviously that trust was obviously, you know, built there. It was always there, you know.
Yeah.
Because you knew there was no abandonment there anyway.
Exactly.
Which is beautiful. So let's move over to you, Rob. Then let's look at some of the core wounds that you experienced in your phase of transcendence and your growth.
Sometimes what a person considers to be one of their strengths is also their weakness. I am a very loyal person, and when I say I'm going to stand by somebody, I stand by them usually to my own detriment. I stand by them even if I'm getting beat up. Like, okay, fine. I sure this is really hard and tough, but I said I was going to be here, so I'm going to be here. And I had to actually learn that once in a while You've got to make a decision for yourself. You've got to know what you need and what is important to you. So I had to learn to be maybe not quite so loyal in the face of absolute disaster.
Yeah.
And that is, and that breaking past that allowed me to still, especially when Angie explained to me that the twin flame dynamic, I was then ready to make choices that I could never make when I was around anybody else. I'm able to make choices to look after myself for a change instead of always looking after the needs of others. I over nurture sometimes terribly, and I probably still do. But
Interesting, isn't it? You know,
yeah,
that's that feminine trait coming in. You know, the inner feminine, which is good.
and I've been told I do have a lot of feminine trait in me. I could be the nurse, maybe.
No, very much so.
But still, I'm still the guy that wants to go out and play a rough game of football too. I'm sometimes so diverse it's hard to understand myself.
Good.
But yeah, that was my big battle was being capable when, especially when Angie came back into my life big time with the explanation of what twin flames were, was being able to jump over that hurdle of absolute loyalty to what I used to believe in the face of something that I definitely do and can believe in, even if it was brand new information. It totally made sense, and I was able to bend over it. That's really a tough description.
Excellent. That's excellent. Like, if you think about both of your learnings together, then how do you feel like your wounds have supported one another?
Well, I think that Angie and I both saw, especially as we were drifting back together and just starting to learn about twin flame stuff, or maybe even just a little bit before that, we both saw that we had grown in the direction that was important to the other person. She was more grounded. I was a little more spiritual, although we hadn't yet learned how much both of us had grown. We had seen those changes in the right direction. So as soon as we started testing those boundaries with each other and saw that there was more than even what just met the eye, there had been more inner growth on both sides, it started a whole realm of rediscovery all over again, just like the first time we met.
Excellent. Did you want to add something there, Angie?
Yeah, I was just going to say, so if we're looking at his wounds versus mine, mine were abandonment and trust, and his was more like loyalty to, like he's saying, the detriment. I think it became a nice balance that I had to learn it wasn't about another person being there for me. It was about me being there for me. And I think his sort of tied in with that because he had to break some loyalty ties in order to be loyal to himself.
Yes.
Instead of being loyal to other people all the time. So for both of us, our healing came back to, ourself, learning to have a relationship, a connection, and basically an honoring of our own selves.
We talk a lot about mirrors and mirroring, and we were mirroring our new selves and our old selves, our old wounds, back and forth to each other. And when we got back together, those mirrorings weren't near so terrifying. We were able to start to learn together on them.
Instead of being triggered from them.
Yes.
Definitely. Yeah. I can relate to that as well. I very much see myself in you, Rob, anyway, in terms of my loyalty. I'm very much that giving of loyalty to others, and I'm learning that journey of learning to love and honor myself, be loyal to myself, so that like you have gone through, having to break relationships in respect that I've got to love and honor myself. And it all comes back to self anyway, because that's all about unification within, isn't it? And learning that, not in a not in an arrogant way or any way, any shape or form, but we are the most important people in our own lives, you know.
Yes.
Um,
If you can't honor who you are within yourself, it's very hard to be able to present yourself to others in a way that they can also understand and respect and be stable with.
yeah.
So when I finally broke my one of my number one rules, of course, a person always has many rules that they've lived with in their lives, but when you finally become a little more flexible with those rules, for example, the rule of when a relationship ends, that means it's over. You can never be more than friends again. You back it off and maybe allow a bridge back for that person, but never, ever would I ever date someone again once the relationship had ended the first time.
Yeah.
I had to bend that rule. That rule was waiting there right in front of me to be bent when Angie came back.
Excellent. If we move further on again, then, so we've gone through, you know, battling with our own egos, you know, learning how to disconnect from the conditions of society and the culture at which we live, so that we can find ourselves. We've healed from those deeper wounds now, you know, the core wounds, or at least we've healed the depth of those wounds in many ways. Now we're learning to come into unification with ourselves. So what was before coming into union together, what was the unification like for yourselves within yourself?
For me, it was very freeing. You know, when I finally realized that I didn't need to worry so much about what another person did or what their actions were, because I always had myself. You know, before I was very codependent and I used to rely on everybody else and I was looking to them for all of my needs being fulfilled. Once I finally realized, wait a second, I am the one that can do that. And I'm the one that needs to do that. It was a very freeing experience to realize I don't need anybody. I may want people in my life, but I don't need to have anybody. I don't need anybody to rely on for my own safety, my own comfort, my own nurturing. So it was a very nice experience to go through that.
What would you say that feeling, if you could define that feeling with one word, what would you say it would be for you?
I would say freeing.
Literally just that freeing.
Very freeing, yeah, because there was no
Beautiful.
more attachment to other people. There was no more requirement of thinking I needed someone else.
So how about yourself, Rob? Tell me more about your phase of unification and how you became at one with everything.
I would like to go to the one word. I like the word that Angie chose. Mine was my one word, and then I'll have to discuss it, would be allowing. I learned to back off on my rigidity from the point of view that as much as Angie and I were getting back together and we were sharing bonds and building bonds and understanding bonds that we had together, in some ways we were still very different people, but I was learning to allow our differences so that we could still grow as individuals, which is very, very important, but also still grow as our twin flames, keep on mirroring ourselves and learning to understand ourselves and seeing ourselves, which sometimes can be a little bit scary when you see yourself reflected in somebody else. That's one level of learning, but learning to accept that sometimes you see things that you like and sometimes you see things that you don't like, but you need to allow them to exist and continue to grow, or else growth is stifled. That's what I needed to learn. People didn't have to be, and Angie didn't have to be exactly like me to fit in my life.
Yeah.
And with that, the unification was about allowing our commonality to be what allows us to be together and what we enjoy, but our differences to still allow us both to grow as individuals and then bring those growths back into the relationship as a common learning. That allowance had to be there.
That's amazing. No, that's really amazing. It's amazing. Yeah. Yeah, unification is a beautiful process. You know, I think we go through many different phases of unification within our lives, you know, regardless of our twin flame journey. But when it comes to the twin flame dynamic, it's kind of a different experience in many ways, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
you've got
See,
that
I see
big
Angie
unity.
now more as amazing than unusual. That's just a little shift, but it's an important shift.
Yeah. And that unification in terms of within as well is you know, what I noticed from what you said was, you know, noticing her as that divine mirror, your divine mirror, and allowing yourself to heal within that, and see yourself as the wholeness of who you are from that space as well, which is quite remarkable, really, because, you know, seeing that divine reflection can be traumatic, as we know. And yet at the same time it can be blissful, but when we can honor the wholeness of what it is, it shifts everything, doesn't it? So
Yes. Yeah, it definitely does. And that's still something that we, look at and deal with still now. If there's something going on and I'm triggered, I always bring it back to myself and go, okay, so what in me is being triggered? Because it's not him. He's just the mirror.
yeah,
So the nice thing is when you've done enough healing, you're able to look at it now and not put the finger on the other person and say, well, what are you doing wrong? So
definitely.
it gets a little easier as you go through the process to be able to always bring it back to self, going, okay, what is in me that I need to heal or look at or face?
And I now see it very similarly. I used to think that people would do weird things to me. Well, no, I've learned that, yes, just like Angie has, it's what are they triggering with me that's causing me to not be able to accept what is happening around me. And
Yeah,
sometimes there is just something that is unacceptable happening. That does happen, but most of the time it's just exposing another wound, just another angle of the mirror.
definitely. Oh, it's a funny thing. It's a funny thing. That mirror that we look into every day, and we sit in front of it, and we start to see all those aspects of ourselves physically that we may not like, and the aspects of ourselves that we think actually it's beautiful. You know, I've got some beautiful aspects within myself if I allow myself to see it. You know, and they can be the hardest things to see. You know, we can easily see the ugly aspects of ourselves at times, but seeing the beautiful aspects, sometimes it doesn't matter how much someone can tell you. You know, you are amazing at this, and this. You know, you should honor that about yourself. You know, it's not until we can look within ourselves and say, look, yeah, this is me. You know, and it's
Yes.
good, isn't it? And for you to see that within one another is a beautiful thing as well, and just noticing that unification.
Mm-hmm.
With whether it's the good, the bad, or the ugly, it's important to still respect what you're seeing and know that it is real. It
Yeah,
really is real. And then work on the stuff that needs some work and enjoy the stuff that is feeling just perfect.
so we've spoken about unification in terms of your individual unifications, but we know that you've obviously come together in unification as twin flame counterparts. So what was your unification process like there as you started to merge into one beautiful, amazing soul in that third energy?
That's another big question. I don't even know where to take that because there's so many ways. Even before we were, what some people might call full union, where you're living together, you're sharing a life together, we were already experiencing union. We were having telepathy. One day, again, this was before we were even living together or married. One day I was meditating and I just saw our one soul as one soul, not two parts, not many parts, but just one beautiful energy. And that was for me when I truly recognized that we were unified. So, a lot of people think that union is living together. And I guess what I'm trying to say is it doesn't have to be, right? When your energies have merged, that can be certainly a part of union too. And that was my experience. It was absolutely just exquisitely beautiful to see our one soul just emanating love. But that was only one piece of our unification. There was, of course, more, the actual coming together physically too.
Well, and that's almost hard to comment on, because if with the, boy, I don't even know how to even word this. I was playing a lot of catch up, because as much as I'd grown to a spot where I knew that, yeah, I could keep up to the 1997 Angie now, I could understand what was going on. She had become the 2014, 2015 Angie. And I felt like I was still playing a lot of catch up, but I had to just, I really was trusting that some of the things I could feel but not describe, she would come back to me with the with her far greater insight and explain it to me in a way that I would understand. And sometimes it didn't make a whole lot of sense, but I knew that was just me not growing enough. Other times she would hit the nail on the head, and I would actually finish off what she was describing as being part of our union. I would finish it off in my own words, because it would just pop to me. It would just pop to me.
Well, even, for example, when I told him we were twin flames, he had never read anything about it. He had not heard the term before.
Not at all.
And yet he was explaining to me what twin flames were. He just knew.
Within a matter of minutes or a day. And I hadn't done any research. It just was coming to me. And she'd fill in the odd blank, and away I'd go again. So I was really starting to respect that connection that we had. It was almost like she was telepathically downloading to me, and then some of the pieces of the puzzles that I'd learned over the years were coming back into that message and aligning themselves. And it was just an incredible growth spurt of spirituality. And with that happening with Angie, I made the choice that I was going to take that leap of faith without any true scientific background and stick with the plan. I was going to make that step. That spark of magic from way in the past had obviously come back. It was time for me to grow. It was time for me to learn, and I was not going to turn my back on it. So what it did is it actually kicked forth the next level of my growth. And there's no unrespecting that. It was absolutely solidly a path I was going to take.
And that's amazing. Like, just connecting with both of what you were going through, like Angie, noticing your souls as one, in the 5-dimensional space, and Rob, you're noticing the connection in the 3rd dimension as well. So it's, you could say the merging of both worlds, into one in terms of unification, which is a great thing. What I noticed there was, or what I wanted to speak about there was briefly, was that we can know so much about twin flames, or know so much about whatever area of life, but knowing is only one step of the equation, isn't it? The learning and knowledge is only one aspect of consciousness, and you could say that's just ego. Yes. And what's beneath the surface is that soul cleansing, that soul healing, that integration, and the loving oneself is really the essential part of the journey, isn't it? The recognition of what the connection is important, but in some ways the label can cause its own problems, can't it? So,
yes, I'm going to say yes and no. People try to take twin flameism, as I call it. They try to take twin flameism and put it within various forms of boxes of how it should work. But if there's anything I've learned from talking with lots of other twin flames, not many in union, most of them still in some form of discovery or separation, or close to getting to union, is that twin flameism is a lot about the journey, and there's so many different individual journeys.
Yeah.
There might be the basis of having one soul and two people, but what that soul with two people is trying to learn can be so different for so many different people. And yet the commonalities are there, but then the diversity is amazing. It's a very beautiful thing.
And that's where I think, yeah, no, I completely agree with you in terms of labels there, because, you know, once we can understand what the connection is, we can realize the, you know, the reflections that we are learning from one another, and what it's teaching us as individuals about ourselves, because
Yes.
it is very much about the ascension path. It's all about, you know, learning to love oneself and come into union with who you are. But I find for me it's about conditioning. You know, what conditions are we placing on anybody in our lives? You know, whether it's our family, our friends, you know, soulmate, or even a twin flame. What conditions are we placing upon to them, which we're in essence placing upon ourselves? You know, so
Very, very true. Very true.
Especially when you look at that, you know, the way I try to explain it to people is it's not just your twin flame is your mirror. Everybody is your mirror, because we're all connected, right? We're not just connected with our twin flame. We're all connected. We're all from the same source energy. So yeah, I think what you said is very, very valuable there.
I think one thing that I find interesting about that, we are all mirrors, and yet at the same time, our twin flame is literally the divine mirror, you know, in everything, you know.
Ultimately, with all the other little bits and pieces and mirrors that I get from people, when someone looks at me and says, "Rob, I really think you need to spend more time learning this because you just don't seem to have it," I still come back to the mirror that I know and trust and understand, because it's the mirror that's going to soothe the next level of growth and journey. The mirror that's going to look me in the eye and say, "Okay, you got this right, but maybe you don't have that. But I need to trust it. I need to just trust my mirror."
So we move on to the final phase of your journey, which is, you
Yeah.
know, it's not a final phase really. It's always a cycle of growth and change and transformation. But the final phase is living in alignment with your soul, you know, in a place of higher self. You know, unity consciousness for me is all about unity consciousness. Then, how do you feel like you live your lives now that you're in a place of unity with one another and the universe at large as well?
For me, it's very much, you know, and I often say this in our videos, it's when you can look at everybody, whether it's somebody in line at the grocery store, whether it's somebody that you see in traffic, and know that they're you and you're them. So that, you know, like you say, the unity consciousness, that we are all connected. We are all part of the same energy. And that way, when you can see things from that perspective, you do very much like that golden rule says, unto others as you want done to you. And you don't do it because you're afraid there's going to be punishment. You do it because you know they're you, right? You can see the higher connection that you are a part of each other.
Definitely.
So it's very much a living from that. I was going to say belief, but I don't think that's the right word. Living from that understanding.
Love it. Love it. How about yourself, Rob, then?
Well, I almost feel like I have two purposes. One of them is to figure out how to actually handle manifestation. That's a great one. That's one of the greatest things. You know, I can sometimes manifest what I really want, and then other times I focus on what I don't want, and I always seem to get whatever I focused on, one way or the other. But really, as much as I see myself as very much part of the collective and an active member in the collective, I still feel like I've got a very strong soul purpose of helping those that are struggling in a path along the way of spirituality, They don't even have to be twin flames. They're just somebody who's on a spiritual path but struggling to make those steps into 4 and 5D and beyond. I feel like I've got an ability, for whatever reason, to help people make those next small steps along the way that help them continue on. And so for me, it's not about participating directly in the unity consciousness, but in taking a great amount of pride and happiness from helping others join the consciousness by helping them along the way. I feel very much like an intermediary.
Definitely. Well, that's amazing. That is really amazing, because, you know, for me, like when we start living in alignment with our, you know, our higher self and our soul pathway, it's really when we're living on purpose. We're providing a greater mission in life. And, you know, that's a beautiful thing to do, because, you know, when it comes to people shifting from the 3D to the 5D and you know, stepping into the spiritual world and, you know, coming to understand what it is they're going through, it's incredibly challenging. So that is definitely a beautiful and profound gift that we can give to others, and that you can give there as well, you know.
For sure.
Yeah, for me, my incredible connection with nature and grounding just always seems to find people that need a little more grounding. I seem to have an excess of it that I can lend to others and that they can take a piece of and continue on with. And it seems to be an endless well within me. And therefore, that is what I would call a purpose.
Excellent. So as we sort of close out the show, you could say, if I was to ask you both one thing that would be your greatest lesson and learning in this beautiful and amazing twin flame journey, what would you pin it down to?
I've got an easy answer with a hard explanation. It's called patience. You have to let things sometimes run their course. Things that you rush, you end up doing over. So sometimes if you realize you've got a difficult learning to do, and let's just say a person thinks that, oh, I could spend a year or two learning something, but let's just learn it in 3 hours and be done with it. Not to be negative, but I got a little bit of good luck with that. Sometimes patience needs to be put into place to allow things to unfold naturally. Could be a word.
Yep.
So that the learning is more complete and is more lasting and can have a better foundation for being a step in the next learning that you need to take. You have to let the steps unfold before you, like stairs appearing in the fog before you.
Love that analogy. Love
it.
it.
Let them be there and be strong enough to hold you and carry you.
He's the king of analogies.
It's very good. No, I love that. I mean, patience is something I felt I was good at. Like you said earlier about, you know, those strength. You feel like you have the greatest strengths, and then you come to realize actually it can be your biggest weakness as well. So
yeah,
very good. Very good. So what about yourself, Angie? What would you say would be the greatest takeaway golden nugget to support people on their journey of the twin flame relationship?
For me, it's, and I again always say this in our videos, is go within. When we learn to trust our own guidance instead of, you know, looking at other people, well, what should I do? And what should I do? If I hadn't learned in our journey how to trust my own guidance, we probably wouldn't be together, because I would have fought forever the push to even tell him, or the push to, you know, start reconnecting. So when we learn to honor our deepest soul's wisdom, man, does it ever take us far in our journey. You know, we can be so intellectual, but when we can get out of our head and go into our soul, and really soul, higher self, whatever people resonate with, it really takes us so far. So yeah, that's been my biggest lesson, is just listen within and honor.
And I love what you say there as well, in terms of connecting with inner wisdom, you know, your inner wisdom, and trusting that. Because, and I don't want to discredit anybody on their journey, but I tend to find that we can be so overwhelmed by emotions and feelings in this dynamic and what it is that we're going through, that we can look so externally from ourselves at maybe readers, psychics, who can give us twin flame guidance about the situation, what's going on, and you come to realize actually that's not helping me, it's hindering me. It's beautiful to get that, but allow ourselves to look within, trust ourselves, love ourselves, and like Rob said, have patience, have trust, you know, allow yourself to work through whatever it is you need. Go to look at your deeper inner wounds and whatever that might be. But no, I love what you said there about looking within, because
yes,
it is where you find the answers, isn't it? So
it really is. I mean, and especially on this journey, because everybody's journey is so unique. Somebody outside of you can't give you the guidance and say, well, you should do this or you should do that, because they're not the one living your life. They don't know the connection that you have with this other person, this same soul that is you. So how can they give you the right guidance?
Every connection is different. It has its own signature. It's like individual snowflakes. Snowflakes don't tell each other how to fall. They just do it in their own way.
Definitely. So tell me a bit more about yourself and your work and what you do today with TwinFinity.
So yeah, basically how we started it, just to kind of go back, is we went to a workshop that was being put on, and in a second workshop that we went to from the same people, they had asked us if we would tell our story. So we told our story, and everybody was just wowed, because of course, you know, to have, first of all, have met so long ago, before twin flames were even a thing per se, was kind of unique. And then to have so long of a separation, 17 years is quite a long separation.
Very long.
Though there's people that have had even more, you know, there's people 25, 30 years on the journey. Hats off to them.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, people were just completely wowed by our story, and we're going, what's the big deal? Like, it's just our journey. So it gave us a recognition of how important it is for other people to hear other people's stories, to, you know, give them hope that, okay, even through all the challenges, even through all the heartache, you can make it through this. So we were guided to just start telling our story, first of all, as part of our mission. And then once we were done that, we've just, of course, through our story, we started getting a lot of questions. I used to spend a lot of my evenings, like hours at a time, just answering people's questions individually. And then we finally started doing question and answer videos. So we do a couple of those every month, just to, you know, support the collective and helping, because of course this is a very unique journey. It's a very hard journey. So a lot of people have questions. So yeah, we just answer people's questions in videos. And then we also now have started a new series called Creating Union, and just all the different things that it takes to come into union. And what we always explain to people is, we're not just teaching you how to come into union with somebody else. We're teaching you how to come into union with yourself first, of course, because union with another can't happen until you have union with self. So yeah, we just offer a lot of videos. We also have a Facebook page where we do, you know, just share different things, share insights, share channeled messages, share pieces of our own journey, whatever, to help inspire people, help people have hope.
And if somebody else gives us a pointer or two that we resonate with, we pass it along.
Yeah,
definitely. And for those of you who are listening and connecting with this video in the recording, all of their links will be below this video, so you can find out more about Angie and Rob and TwinFinity below. You'll have links to your Facebook page, Instagram. I know you're connected on Instagram because we've connected there.
Yeah.
And obviously your website as well. We'll make sure all the links are available to you. So just wanted to finally say it's really been a pleasure sharing your story and listening to your story, because, you know, as we've mentioned, you know, each and every journey is unique, and it's, you know, it's an individual journey, however much it's that parallel journey of, you know, coming into partnership, you know, somewhere along the lines. It's been a real pleasure connecting with you with it.
Yeah, with you as well.
This has been a lot of fun. Thank you.
A pleasure. Is there any last parting words of wisdom to share?
I think just, to help people know that there is a purpose in everything they're going through. So many times they'll be like, well, this happened, and oh my gosh, is he ever going to speak to me again? Or is she ever going to call me again? And to know that, number one, you can't screw it up, in my opinion. You're one soul, so you're always going to come back to each other, no matter how much you trigger each other, no matter how much you frustrate each other. So just trust the path, trust the divinity in it. And also, the biggest thing is trust the divine timing, that, we may think we're ready for union, and we may think we're at a place of wholeness, but our soul really knows. Our soul really knows when the right time is. And if we just honor that divine timing, things will flow as they're supposed to.
And for me, it's a lot about respecting the people around me. I've learned so much from people who have been either mentors right down to the people that have annoyed the heck out of me simply because of the way that they are. They've all been in education. So respect the situations or people or whatever it is around you. It all is part of a purpose. And don't be afraid to wait for a little bit of an answer. Everything doesn't have to make sense right away. Back to that patience. Patience, patience, patience. That's what happens when people get stuck. That's what I always preach. And, a day or a week or a month later, the patience usually pays off.
Excellent. Well, thank you again for joining me. Thank you all for listening. Do hope you found this to be valuable today, and I will connect with you again in another video. And with that, I will say bye for now. And thank you again, Rob and Angie.
Thank you.
And bye.
Bye-bye.